To the transition of power in Washington. Some of the people President-elect Donald Trump has already nominated for top jobs are facing new scrutiny. And
throughout the election cycle, you likely heard the Harris campaign and Democrats sound the alarm about so-called Project 2025.
He has stayed as a close advisor to the president-elect. We know that he was deeply involved in Project 2025. He wrote a chapter of it, but also significantly contributed to the other chapters of it. Now we know
GOP allies admitted that Project 2025 was a plan all along, less than 24 hours after Trump's win was called.
I prefer to be anonymous for this interview.
I would prefer to stay anonymous.
I prefer to be anonymous.
I am a lesbian. I am a minority.
My gender identity is non-binary, and I do have a transgender status.
I am a public school educator.
A goal of Project 2025 is to change the definition of sex in relation to Title IX from a person's actual or perceived gender assigned at birth, gender identity, and sexual orientation to their definition. Men and women are biological realities, and one's sex only falls into this binary. In their definition, transgender individuals or anyone outside of this binary are not recognized. This would impact transgender individuals' ability to file a Title IX in regards to sex discrimination. This implies that students in any grade level will no longer be protected from discrimination in regards to their sexual orientation or gender identity. How do you think this will affect you, LGBTQ+ students?
In awful ways. I would fully anticipate suicide rates to increase.
In the job that I plan to go into later in life, it is a very male-dominated industry and very conservative industry. So going into that, knowing that there is even less protection for me is just a scarier thought than what it already is.
We're going backwards in so many ways, and this is just another way in which we've thought we've come so far, and this conservative movement is trying to push everything back the opposite direction.
Especially with the idea that I'm already not going to be respected, and with that, if that goes into order, then there is literally no protection for me at any period of time, and it would either have to be hide or find something completely different or just completely lie as a person.
The Supreme Court case, Bostock v. Clayton County, is interpreted today as preventing discrimination in the workplace based on sexual orientation, transgender status, and gender identity. On paper, the case only addressed and forbade an employer firing or refusing to hire someone based on their sexual orientation or transgender status. Project 2025 aims to rescind regulations prohibiting discrimination that have been implemented additionally based on this case. This means that discrimination based on sexual orientation would be allowed in the workplace, outside of the context of hiring and firing. Project 2025 aims to direct sex discrimination laws based on the biological binary meaning of sex that they have assigned, meaning individuals would no longer be protected against discrimination in regards to gender identity, even in regards to hiring and firing. How would this affect you as someone who is a lesbian, as someone who does not fall into either gender binary in the workforce?
I likely would not get hired. I already feel unconfident putting my pronouns on my resume.
It would affect my employment status and my employability.
I don't go by my pronouns at work that I have currently. And it's not fun to pretend that or just like even act like it's not that, but having to willingly hide who I am as a person feels very discriminatory.
So let's be clear. As a lesbian, and I have been a lesbian for several decades now, I have seen where employers, especially in states viewed as right-to-work states, can basically discriminate against you and offer other reasons or no reason at all as to why you're not being hired, even though you are qualified or even in some cases overqualified for the positions that you are applying for. Say, for example, if we're living in one of these right-to-work states, such as, say, Virginia or Georgia, and the environment in which you're applying, unbeknownst to you at the time of application, is hostile against members of the LGBTQIA+++ community, then they can refuse to hire you, as is their right, because it's a right-to-work state. But then if you find out that the reason that they didn't hire you was because of your sexual identity or orientation, then without federal protection, you cannot pursue further action. And that could be throughout the entire time of your employment. Further, I have been in situations where I've had wrenches thrown at my head because I was, pardon the term, dyke in a male-dominated industry. So we need these protections. It's not to say that every employer is the same way, but why give someone that would engage in criminal activity the right to do so?
A goal of Project 2025 is to replace four-year universities' higher education ideology with bolstering the workforce skills of Americans to prepare them to work in our, quote, dynamic economy. How do you think this would affect education?
It's scary. I think, then why aren't we just, a community? We're just replacing universities with community colleges. Just come here and learn a trade. Come here and get trained to do a job. There's so much more to being a participatory global citizen, which is why, in my opinion, that's the purpose of schooling. You're learning to live in a democratic society. And what skills do you need to do that? You need to be a critical thinker. You need to be able to communicate well. You need to be able to listen. You need to learn to respect and tolerate people that have differences. All of those things are what, we talk about general education and those types of things, but it's making people well-rounded individuals. And when you go to college just to learn a job, that's not necessarily making you a knowledgeable, participatory citizen. So I don't think you can underscore the importance of a university education and all that comes with it, not just preparing people for the workforce. We're preparing people for the world.
Project 2025 equates the expression of transgender individuals to pornography. Project 2025 calls for a ban on pornography and therefore a ban on transgender expression. The writers of this project continue to say that people who produce and distribute pornography should be imprisoned, meaning that individuals who express being transgender should be imprisoned. How will this impact you as a transgender person?
I am already concerned about the way people view my gender identity, and knowing that it will become a crime is ridiculous to me. It makes no sense why I can't just exist around people without them assuming that I am pornographic in nature because I use gender-neutral pronouns. I don't get the line of thinking to pornography. There's nothing pornographic about my gender. There's nothing pornographic about me. There's no difference in what I do every day than what a cis straight person does. So the idea of me being imprisoned for not meeting a societal expectation makes very little to no sense. Think about it real quick before we push this through.
Have you had any children with another woman?
Actually, yes, I married a woman that had 2 children, and I helped her raise both children.
Project 2025 does not outright call for a ban on same-sex marriage, but its family agenda implies such. They say, and I quote, "Married men and women are the ideal, natural family structure because all children have a right to be raised by the men and women who conceived them." As someone who has raised children with a woman, how do you think this would impact future people in your position seeking to start a family with a same-sex partner?
Well, if this passes into law, it would make it extremely difficult for individuals that are already a unit to raise their children. You would be forcing people into criminality by hiding their relationships and hiding their lifestyle and how they're raising their children. I mean, this is history repeating itself. It happened in Nazi Germany, and it's happened in Russia, where people of the LGBTQIA+++ community, although back then it would have been LGBT community, were exposed to a lot of unfair practices and even murdered based on the fact of how they chose to love.
Project 2025 aims to delete the terms sexual orientation and gender identity, SOGI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, gender, gender equality, gender equity, gender awareness, gender sensitive, abortion, reproductive health, and reproductive rights from every federal rule, agency regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and piece of legislation that exists. In short, this means that their aim is to get rid of previously established protections for individuals that are part of the LGBTQ+ community, people of color, and women. As someone who is protected under these policies, how do you feel about the threat of them being taken away?
Oh, I'm terrified. I grew up in an era where members of the LGBT community, there wasn't QIA++ at the time, but we had to really struggle for our rights. We also really had to keep ourselves hidden and hope and prayed no one figured out what our lifestyle was and or we would be retaliated upon.
Just taking all of that out makes all of our lives harder for no reason. And it makes the people of, especially part of my community, look like criminals when we do the same thing everybody else does. And we just exist.
In the past, especially in my early 20s, I did lose a few jobs based on the fact that I was a lesbian. I've also been attacked and had physical aggression perpetrated on me because of that as well.
The threat of that being taken away, especially the biggest one that comes to my mind is marriage licenses that will become non-existent with that. And I don't have a dream of getting married or anything. I think it would be nice to have someone to spend my life with, and I don't think it's going to be a heterosexual relationship. And knowing that I won't be able to simply live with someone, it's just kind of infuriating because everything they're saying they want to do has no standing. It's just hate for no reason.
I don't think that we should take those rights of protection away from the federal government because they act as a fail-safe to make sure that everyone has equality under law. Without a strong federal government being able to enforce those things, we revert back to the times of Jim Crow, where we had members of the African American community being abused of, brutalized, and experiencing a lot of economic deficits. And I see that happening or the possibility of that happening without oversight, federal oversight.
Project 2025 says that people who express being transgender or support being transgender are child predators and misogynistic exploiters of women. How does this make you feel as a transgender individual?
The idea that they're equating me to a predator and a misogynist makes no sense. No sense to me. I don't think it makes sense to literally anybody in that community. This community has been a lot more accepting to hearing that side and helping through it than when I was around cis and straight people a lot, where it felt taboo and hidden. It's shameful that people would just assume that because of the way I identify that I am a predator.
Project 2025 aims to eliminate the Department of Education. With the Department of Education being dissolved, criteria for accreditation would be the state's responsibilities. How would this affect education?
Well, I just like to say, if our country can overturn, or our Supreme Court can overturn Roe v. Wade, who's to say we couldn't overturn Brown v. Education, which is really removing that separate but equal idea. I think depending on the state, it could be really disastrous. I think it would probably feed back into, what if people want to be separate? What if, whites only want to go to school with whites? And we go back to these old ideas, that have been overturned again since the late 1800s, we talk about the civil rights movement. I mean, that's when Brown v. Board of Education came about, but I fear a reverting back to maybe separate but equal, because it's never equal. It's separate and unequal.
Is there anything else you want to say in regards to Project 2025?
Well, I did go on the website and I looked up the intro for this Project 2025, and it said that the next conservative president will enter office on January 2025 with a simple choice: greatness or failure. That sort of dichotomal thinking is incorrect. It gives no leeway for structures, protections, and for people throughout the country.
It feels very manifesto. We're trying to rewrite the system to benefit one side solely, with no real purpose other than to make that one side more powerful.
These are things that Hitler had said in multiple speeches. This is a call to move toward dictatorship, as opposed to what the fundamentals of democracy, which our country was founded on. So, just based on that alone, I am dubious about the document and any laws that may come out of it, and I am terrified for our future.
I woke up on November 6th, probably somewhat still in shock, kind of frozen, paralyzed. And then it took no time to realize that this agenda is probably something that's going to happen. And unfortunately, when, every day you watch the news, you hear another happening. And if you look into Project 25, which I did just a little bit, it feels like it's happening. And it's very scary. It's like, how do you stop this tidal wave? I feel, as an educator, as a human, as a woman, we're going to have to hit rock bottom before we can start getting the pendulum to swing to the other side. And I mean, I would use this metaphor, like there's a ship coming and it's a big ship and you're out in the ocean and there's these sharks that are all of these different cabinet members that are being put in, and they're just picking people off left and right. And it's like the only way you can maybe come out on the other side is to swim to the very bottom and hang on, clench on to whatever little piece of seaweed or shell you can find and hold your breath until you can finally emerge after that big, huge ship and its propellers have passed. And I feel like we're getting ready to have to do a deep dive and hold our breath as we watch this very, very conservative Project 2025 agenda be put into motion.